I am Joshua, 32, and my own mother banned me from my brother's wedding because I would ruin the atmosphere. Before I tell you about how my own wedding guest list and a fleet of Rolls-Royces made her faint, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I still remember the exact temperature of the room when my mother looked me dead in the eye and erased me from our family. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. The air conditioning in her pristine, suburban living room was humming a quiet, steady rhythm. She stood by the massive marble fireplace, carefully adjusting her diamond earrings in the ornate mirror above the mantel. She did not even bother to look at my face when she delivered the final blow. "It's better if you don't come, Joshua," she said. Her voice was smoother than glass, practiced and perfectly hollow. "You'd ruin the atmosphere. You know how you are. So serious. Always judging everything. It is Julian's special day, and we simply cannot risk any tension." I did not yell. I did not throw the expensive crystal vase sitting on the coffee table. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the white leather sofa until my knuckles turned completely white. My jaw locked tight, my teeth grinding together so hard my head began to pound. The silence in that room was heavy enough to crush bones. For 32 years I had played by their rules. I showed up to every mandatory holiday dinner. I brought $100 bottles of wine to every family gathering. I smiled for their perfect, coordinated Christmas cards. But in that one defining moment, watching her smooth out the invisible wrinkles in her designer dress, the absolute truth hit me like a runaway freight train. I was not a son. I was a prop. And the moment the prop did not fit the glamorous aesthetic of their grand destination wedding, I was shoved out the back door and told to stay in the dark. I turned around and walked out of that house without saying a single word. I remember the heavy thud of the solid oak door clicking shut behind me. It sounded like an ending. Little did she know, it was the exact moment I started writing a completely new beginning. 2 months later, while she was still busy posting heavily filtered, picture-perfect photos from Venice, a different notification popped up on her phone. A live stream, a global event. When she clicked that link and saw me standing in front of the ocean, surrounded by the most powerful people in the country stepping out of a line of Rolls-Royces, her legs actually gave out. But to understand how we got to that explosive moment, to understand the sheer weight of that revenge, I have to take you back to where the cracks in this family really started. Growing up, our house looked like something straight out of a luxury real estate magazine. We had a meticulously manicured lawn, a shiny SUV parked in the sweeping driveway, and a golden retriever that only barked when he was told to. But behind those heavy mahogany doors, the hierarchy was set in stone. My older brother, Julian, was the undisputed king of the castle. He was charismatic, loud, and effortlessly charming. He played varsity football, dated the prom queen, and knew exactly how to flash $1 million smile to get out of absolutely any trouble he caused. I was the exact opposite. I liked quiet rooms. I liked reading thick biographies and figuring out how things worked. I focused entirely on my grades because I figured out early on that if I was not going to be the charming one, I had to be the useful one. I thought hard work and reliability would eventually earn me a permanent place at the table. I was incredibly naive. I remember the day I got my acceptance letter to a top-tier university. I ran downstairs, my heart hammering in my chest, waving the thick envelope. My dad patted me on the shoulder, said, "Good job, champ," without looking away from the television, and immediately turned the volume up to watch Julian's high school highlight reel. Later that year, my parents sat me down at the kitchen island. My dad cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at me. They explained that Julian's out-of-state tuition, his fraternity dues, and his endless spring break trips had severely drained the college fund. I would have to take out student loans. I nodded, swallowing the massive lump forming in my throat. I worked double shifts at a greasy local diner, saving every single dollar of my meager salary just to buy textbooks and pay my rent. As we grew older, the gap between us only widened. Julian bounced from job to job, constantly needing to be bailed out of financial messes. There was a particularly messy situation involving a shady business deal where my parents had to hire a high-priced lawyer to keep him out of court. They paid for everything, no questions asked, draining their savings to protect his image. Meanwhile, I climbed the corporate ladder in silence. I missed sleep, skipped vacations, and fought tooth and nail for every single promotion I got. I built a highly successful life for myself out of pure grit and determination. Yet, whenever we had family dinners, the narrative remained the exact same. Aunt Beatrice, the master of passive-aggressive manipulation in our family, would lean across the dining table, her eyes dripping with fake pity. "Joshua, you work way too much. Look at your brother Julian, he just has this natural glow about him. He enjoys life. You really should try to be more like your brother." My parents would nod in absolute agreement. My dad would pour Julian another glass of expensive scotch, laughing at a joke Julian stole from a comedian, and completely ignore my presence. I was the serious one, the boring one, the guy who paid his own bills, managed his own life, and did not cause drama, which in my family's eyes made me entirely invisible. I kept telling myself that one day they would see my value. I kept thinking that if I just loved them enough, if I was just loyal enough, their conditional affection would magically turn into real love. I was holding my breath for a miracle that was never, ever going to happen. The grand illusion of our happy family completely shattered on a rainy Thursday evening in October. We were all gathered at a high-end steakhouse downtown. The lighting was dim, the waiters wore white gloves, and the steaks cost more than what I used to make in a week at the diner. Julian stood up, clinking his crystal glass with a heavy silver spoon. He pulled his girlfriend, Claire, into his arms and loudly announced they were engaged. The entire table erupted. My mother actually shrieked with joy, dabbing her eyes with a cloth napkin to protect her mascara. My dad slapped the heavy oak table, hollered for the waiter, and ordered a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than my first car. I sat there, frozen in my leather chair. I looked around the table. Everyone was cheering. Everyone seemed to know. My aunt, my cousins, even the family friends sitting at the far end of the table were nodding and smiling like it was an expected performance. I was the only person in the room who had absolutely no idea this was happening. I forced my mouth into a wide, convincing smile. I stood up, walked over to my brother, and patted him firmly on the back. "Congratulations, man. I'm really happy for you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Julian flashed his signature smile, grabbing my shoulder and shaking it. "Thanks, Josh. We are going to need your help with the planning, honestly. You have that corporate organization brain. We need it to keep everything on track." That tiny, throwaway sentence lit a massive spark in my chest. For a brief, stupid second, I thought this was finally it. This was my chance to prove my worth. This was my ticket into the inner circle. The very next day, I spent hours during my lunch break researching exclusive venues, drafting up detailed budget spreadsheets, and calling high-end caterers. I printed everything out, put it in a sleek leather binder, and brought it to my parents' house that weekend. I walked into the kitchen, placing the heavy binder on the marble island with a proud smile. My mother glanced at the binder like it was a piece of rotting garbage. "Oh, Joshua, what is this?" she asked, her tone dripping with exhaustion. "I pulled some amazing options for Julian's wedding," I said, leaning forward. "Venues with great natural lighting, custom menus, some fantastic local jazz bands." Just then, a man in a sharp pink suit walked into the kitchen holding an iPad. "Aaron, Julian's ridiculously overpriced, incredibly arrogant wedding planner." Aaron picked up my binder with 2 fingers, flipped through exactly 1 page, and let out a loud, condescending sigh. "Oh, honey," Aaron drawled, tossing the binder back onto the counter. It slid and hit the fruit bowl. "We are doing a high-end destination concept. This is a bit too local, too budget-friendly. We have already decided on the aesthetic, and this just doesn't fit the vibe." My mother smiled a tight, apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks, honey, but we've already decided. Aaron has everything completely under control." Over the next 3 weeks, I tried offering help multiple times. I sent links to lighting specialists, I offered to help negotiate the catering contracts to save them money. Every single time I was met with the exact same dismissive tone. "We've got it handled, Josh. Don't worry about it, Josh." It was not just the words they used. It was the way they looked at me, like I was a stranger off the street trying to crash an exclusive VIP party. I was entirely, fundamentally shut out of my own brother's life. A month before the wedding, I was sitting at my office desk, reviewing some complex vendor contracts, when my phone buzzed on the glass table. It was a text message from my younger cousin, Matthew. Matthew and I were never particularly close, mostly because his mother and my mother were constantly fighting over some ancient, bitter inheritance dispute regarding our grandfather's estate, but Matthew and I got along fine at holidays. I unlocked my phone and opened the message. It was a screenshot of an iMessage group chat. The chat was boldly titled Julian's Wedding Week VIPs. My eyes quickly scanned the screen, and my stomach plummeted straight into the floor. There were at least 20 different phone numbers in that chat. My parents, Julian, Claire, aunts, uncles, cousins. Literally everyone in our extended family was in it. Everyone except me. The screenshot captured a conversation from late the night before. Julian had sent a picture of himself in a custom-tailored tuxedo, holding a glass of whiskey. Matthew had replied, "Looks sharp. Is Josh wearing the same one for the groomsmen photos?" My mother's response popped up immediately below it. "Oh heavens no. We didn't bother telling Joshua about the fitting. You know exactly how he is. He would probably complain about the price of the suits and bring down the whole mood. He is so stiff." Julian replied instantly with a laughing emoji. "Yeah, keep the corporate drone at his desk. We want fun energy only in Italy. If Josh comes, he'll just sit in the corner and judge everyone." I stared at the glowing screen until the black text completely blurred. My chest physically ached. A sharp, stabbing pain right behind my ribs. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. Italy? What were they talking about? Before my brain could even process the geographical location, Matthew sent another frantic text. "Oh man, I am so sorry, Josh. My hands were typing too fast. I meant to send that screenshot to my brother. Please don't tell Aunt Margaret I leaked the chat. She'll kill me." I did not reply to Matthew. I set my phone face down on my desk. The silence in my office was deafening. My own mother, my own brother, mocking me behind my back, actively organizing a massive, milestone family event, and specifically orchestrating every detail so I would remain completely in the dark. All those years of trying to be the perfect, reliable son. All those years of paying for expensive anniversary dinners, quietly helping fix Dad's car, sending generous gifts for every single holiday. It meant absolutely nothing to them. I was a walking joke to my own blood. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking slightly with pure adrenaline, and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright, cheery, and entirely fake. "Hi Joshua, are you working hard at the office?" "Mom," I said. My voice was dangerously calm, barely above a whisper. "Why am I not in the wedding week group chat?" There was a sharp, sudden pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing change, catching in her throat. "Oh, honey," she stammered, quickly recovering her composure. "That's just for logistics. You know, flight numbers, hotel bookings, that sort of boring stuff. Nothing personal at all. We just didn't want your phone buzzing all day while you were working so hard towards that big promotion you talked about." It was a lie. Clean, practiced, disgusting lie. I closed my eyes and let the cold reality wash over me. I was not part of this family anymore. I was an outsider looking through a locked glass door. 2 agonizing days later, the final nail in the coffin was hammered in. I was standing in the corporate break room, pouring myself a cup of terrible, burnt coffee, when Greg from the marketing department walked in. Greg was a loud, obnoxious guy who knew Julian from their college fraternity days. "Hey Josh," Greg said casually, aggressively stirring sugar into his mug. "Man, I am so jealous of you right now. When is your flight to Venice?" Julian's Instagram stories of the venue walkthrough look absolutely insane. That canal view is crazy. The ceramic coffee cup slipped slightly in my hand, splashing burning liquid onto my thumb. I didn't even flinch. I stared at Greg. Venice, I managed to say, forcing my voice to stay level. Yeah, the destination wedding. Greg looked confused, pausing his stirring. Next week? The grand villa on the Grand Canal? You're the brother of the groom. Don't tell me you forgot your own flight. Right? I forced a dry chuckle, my throat tight. Yeah, it's going to be a wild week. I just have a lot of major contracts to wrap up before I head out. I walked quickly back to my desk, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. Venice. The wedding was in Venice, Italy. My dream city. The place I had talked about visiting since I was 10 years old. They were hosting a luxurious wedding in Venice, and they hadn't even sent me a formal invitation. That night, after work, I drove straight to my parents' house in the suburbs. I didn't knock. I used my old silver key and walked right through the front door. The massive living room was in absolute chaos. It was covered in lavish floral arrangements, expensive garment bags, and matching designer luggage. My mother was standing by the mirror, which brings us perfectly back to that exact moment I told you about at the beginning of this story. Mom, I said, stepping into the center of the room. Where is my invitation to Venice? She froze mid-motion. She slowly turned around, smoothing down the front of her skirt. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look remorseful. She looked profoundly annoyed. Annoyed that I was standing there, forcing her to have an uncomfortable conversation she had desperately tried to avoid. Joshua, the guest list is incredibly tight, she sighed, crossing her arms. Claire's parents paid for the primary venue, and they have a massive extended family. We had to make severe cuts to the list. Cuts. I took a step forward, my voice rising just a fraction. I am your son. I am his brother. I am not a second cousin you haven't seen in 10 years. That was the exact moment she looked at me with those cold, empty, calculating eyes and delivered the fatal blow. It's better if you don't come, Joshua. You'd ruin the atmosphere. You know how you are. So serious. Always judging everything. It is Julian's special day, and we simply cannot risk any tension. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. Really looked at her. I saw a complete stranger. I turned on my heel and walked out into the cold night air. A week later, my social media timeline was flooded. Wyatt, a guy I grew up playing Little League Baseball with, a guy I considered a friend, posted a massive photo album. Epic weekend in Venice with the best crew. There they all were. My parents laughing heartily, Julian posing in his custom Italian tuxedo, cousins drinking expensive champagne on private gondolas. Wyatt didn't even care that I wasn't there. They threw me away without a single second thought. But standing in my living room, looking at those photos, instead of crying, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The heavy, suffocating chains were finally gone. I owed these people absolutely nothing. I sat in my dark living room, the pale blue light from my phone screen illuminating the empty space around me. My fiancée, Chloe, walked into the room. Chloe is a fiercely intelligent, high-powered corporate lawyer. She deals with messy divorces, brutal custody battles, and corporate takeovers daily. She sees through everyone's nonsense, and from day one, she had always seen right through my family's fake, polished smiles. She sat next to me on the couch, gently taking the phone out of my hand and placing it on the table. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Are you going to let them break you, Joshua?" she whispered, her voice steady and strong. I looked at her, the woman who actually loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. A strange, quiet fire started burning deep in my chest. It wasn't rage. It was pure, unadulterated resolve. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "I am not going to let them break me. I am going to redefine exactly who I am. And I am going to do it so loudly they won't be able to look away." The very next morning, I called my best friend, Nathan. Nathan is a guy who tells it exactly like it is, no sugarcoating. We met up at a quiet, upscale coffee shop downtown. I laid everything out on the table. The leaked group chat, the Venice lie, the brutal moment my mother banned me from the family. Nathan gripped his coffee cup, his knuckles turning white. "Do you want to ruin their reputation?" Nathan asked, his eyes flashing. "I know people. We can make their lives very uncomfortable." "No." I shook my head firmly. "Revenge is loud, messy, and cheap. I want something significantly better. I want reinvention. Chloe and I are moving up our wedding date. We are doing it our way, on our terms. We had exactly 2 months. We didn't want a quiet, small, intimate gathering anymore. We wanted a masterpiece." I reached out to Cameron, a high-level PR strategist I had helped out of a massive corporate crisis a few years back. He owed me a massive favor. I sat in Cameron's sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city and laid out my vision. "I don't just want a wedding, Cameron," I said, leaning over his desk. "I want a global statement. I want a live-streamed, flawlessly executed event. And here is the catch. I want every single dollar given as a wedding gift to go directly to a children's education charity. A massive fundraiser disguised as a luxury wedding." Cameron leaned back in his expensive leather chair, a slow, brilliant smile spreading across his face. "You want to turn your wedding into a philanthropic media phenomenon to overshadow a petty family dispute? Joshua, you are absolutely brilliant. Let's make some calls right now." Chloe took charge of the logistical details with the terrifying precision of a courtroom litigator preparing for trial. She found a breathtaking, highly exclusive coastal venue situated on a dramatic cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, I contacted Adrian, a legendary Italian designer I had met during a tense brand merger in Milan. When I flew out and told Adrian my story over espresso, he refused to charge me his standard exorbitant fee. "I will make you a suit that speaks much louder than any words ever could," he promised, taking my measurements himself. We kept everything completely underground. No cryptic social media posts, no hints, no gossip. Only our tightest inner circle, my most trusted colleagues, and high-profile clients knew what was coming. I sent out heavy, gold-embossed, handcrafted invitations with secure QR codes linking to a private RSVP site. My guest list wasn't just friends. It included industry titans, tech CEOs, and heavy-hitting philanthropists. While my family was busy bragging online about their quaint Italian vacation, Chloe and I were building an empire in absolute silence. Every time my mother sent a fake, guilt-ridden text saying, "Hope you are doing okay, sweetie," I simply deleted it without replying. I was a man on a mission, and the storm was approaching fast. The morning of the wedding, the sky over the dramatic coastline was painted in brilliant, sweeping shades of gold, amber, and deep purple. The massive ocean waves crashed violently against the jagged cliffs far below, creating a steady, powerful rhythm that perfectly matched the rapid beating of my heart. I stood in the expansive master suite of the private coastal estate, carefully adjusting the silver cufflinks of my bespoke suit. Adrian had completely outdone himself. The dark midnight blue fabric fit perfectly. It didn't just feel like clothing, it felt like armor. I looked in the full-length antique mirror and did not recognize the man staring back at me. Gone was the quiet, invisible brother who begged for scraps of affection. Gone was the son who tolerated being treated like an afterthought. The man in the mirror was powerful, composed, and belonged exactly where he stood. Nathan burst into the room, holding 2 heavy crystal glasses of aged bourbon. He handed me one, clinking his glass sharply against mine. "Look out the window, man," he said, a massive grin on his face. "You are not going to believe this." I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the winding, scenic driveway leading up to the estate. A sudden chill of pure triumph ran down my spine. A flawless, synchronized line of black Rolls-Royces, sleek silver Porsches, and custom SUVs was making its way slowly through the massive iron security gates. Valets in sharp uniforms were rushing to open doors. Out stepped people my parents had spent their entire pathetic lives trying to impress but could never even get a meeting with. "Mr. Carter, The billionaire CEO of the massive tech firm I had partnered with, stepped out of a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom, casually adjusting his silk tie. World-renowned journalists, angel investors, and elite business leaders were gathering on the manicured green lawn, chatting and holding champagne flutes. My phone vibrated violently in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from my mother. "Having a quiet Sunday here. Julian and Claire are coming over for a little backyard barbecue later. Hope you're resting and not working too hard." I stared at the glowing message, a genuine, unapologetic smile spreading across my face. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt pity. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without typing a single letter. Outside, the professional camera crew gave the signal. The high-definition drones were up in the sky, buzzing quietly. The lighting was absolutely perfect. It was time to walk out there and show the entire world who Joshua really was. A world-class string quartet began playing a hauntingly beautiful, modern arrangement as I stepped out onto the expansive cliffside terrace. The collective gasp from the high society crowd was clearly audible over the sound of the ocean. But the real magic was happening through the massive lenses of the 5 professional broadcast cameras capturing every single angle of the venue. The stream, officially titled The Coastal Groom, a celebration for change, went live across 3 major platforms simultaneously, heavily boosted by Cameron's massive, aggressive PR network. When Chloe walked down the aisle, the entire world seemed to stop spinning on its axis. She looked like absolute royalty in a custom silk gown that flowed like water. We stood together under a massive canopy of imported white orchids, the salty ocean breeze gently catching her veil. We didn't just exchange traditional vows. We made a public, powerful declaration of partnership, resilience, and purpose. As soon as the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I didn't just kiss my bride. I turned around to face the main broadcast camera dead on. "Chloe and I want to deeply thank everyone standing here today, and the hundreds of thousands of you tuning in and watching around the world right now," I said, my voice echoing clearly and confidently over the state-of-the-art microphone system. Today is about celebrating love, yes, but it is also about building a legacy. We are turning our personal celebration into global action. I pointed to the massive, high-definition LED screens flanking the beautiful terrace. They instantly lit up with a live, real-time donation tracker for a global children's education fund. Every single dollar raised today, every gift, goes directly to making sure no child, anywhere, ever feels invisible, forgotten, or left behind. Within 60 seconds, the digital tracker absolutely exploded. Donations poured in from around the globe like a tidal wave. The custom hashtag began trending instantly, shooting straight to the #1 spot worldwide. And right at that exact moment, thousands of miles away back in her pristine suburban living room, my mother's phone started exploding with frantic notifications. Cousins, family friends, jealous neighbors. Everyone was furiously sending her the live stream link. According to my Aunt Beatrice, who loves to gossip, my mother clicked the link, saw her outcast son standing confidently next to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, saw the fleet of Rolls-Royces gleaming in the sun, and literally fainted, collapsing right onto her expensive Persian rug. This is a moment that changed everything, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please like the video and leave a comment below to let me know you've been with me. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The reception that followed was nothing short of spectacular. Crystal chandeliers hung gracefully from clear luxury tents, illuminating the night sky with a warm, golden glow. A famous jazz band was playing perfectly in the background, the music blending seamlessly with the sound of the crashing waves. I was standing near a massive, intricately carved ice sculpture, laughing with Mr. Carter about a recent corporate merger and market trends, when I finally decided to pull my phone out of my tailored pocket. The screen was completely lit up. I had exactly 94 unread text messages and 12 missed calls. My mother, "Joshua, what on earth is going on?" Call me immediately. My mother, why are you on the national news? Whose cars are those? Where are you? My mother, Joshua, answer your phone right now. Your father is freaking out. Then, right below her frantic demands, came the long message from Julian, the golden child, the brother who thought I was too boring, too stiff, and too poor to sit at his exclusive table in Italy. Julian, so this is your grand payback? You planned this whole giant, fake philanthropic spectacle just to try and upstage my wedding? You are unbelievably petty and selfish, Josh. Mom is in tears. I stared at Julian's text for a long, quiet moment. A few months ago, an accusation like that from my older brother would have sent me into a devastating spiral of guilt and anxiety. I would have immediately called him, apologized profusely, and tried to desperately explain myself to keep the peace. Not anymore. That version of Joshua was dead and buried. I typed a reply with one hand while holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne in the other. Me? No, Julian. This is not payback. This is peace. Enjoy your backyard barbecue. I hit send, switched the phone to completely silent, and slid it back into my pocket. Later that night, as the party was reaching its peak, Cameron ran up to me, pulling me aside and excitedly shoving an iPad into my hands. Look at this, Josh, he grinned, out of breath. The digital charity tracker had just rapidly crossed the $2 million mark. Major international news outlets were rapidly picking up the story, plastering it across their front pages. The headlines read, "The corporate executive who turned his secret wedding into a $2 million philanthropic empire." I scrolled through the articles. Not a single one mentioned my family. Not a single post brought up my brother's aesthetically pleasing Italian getaway. Their grand event was completely eclipsed, entirely forgotten by the world. I had successfully and completely rewritten the narrative of my own life. For years, I had exhausted my soul, drained my energy, and broken my own heart trying to earn their basic approval. I had constantly tried to shrink myself down so Julian could look bigger and brighter. I had hidden my career success and my salary so my mother wouldn't feel uncomfortable or threatened. But standing there on that beautiful cliff, holding my brilliant wife Chloe's hand as magnificent fireworks erupted over the dark Pacific Ocean, I realized the ultimate, profound truth about family and respect. True power isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. It isn't about screaming matches or demanding apologies that will never be sincere. True power is building a world so beautiful, so successful, and so utterly untouchable that they can only watch it from the outside, pressing their faces against the glass. They had chosen to shut the door on me, to leave me out in the cold. But tonight, the entire world saw that I was the one who walked away, and I was the one who permanently locked that door behind me. The morning after the wedding, I woke up to a reality that felt entirely alien. For 32 years of my life, I had woken up every single day with a tight, heavy knot of anxiety sitting right at the bottom of my stomach. It was the exhausting, endless anxiety of wondering what I needed to do, what I needed to say, or how much money I needed to spend to finally earn a permanent seat at my family's table. But that morning, lying next to Chloe in the massive master suite of the coastal estate, listening to the Pacific Ocean crashing against the cliffs below, that knot was completely gone. The silence inside my mind was profound. I didn't feel the need to check my phone for a passive-aggressive text from my mother. I didn't feel the need to see what Julian was bragging about online. I was finally entirely free. When Chloe and I returned to the city on Monday morning, the atmosphere around my entire existence had shifted. I walked into the grand marble lobby of my corporate headquarters, and the air crackled with a different kind of energy. I was no longer just Joshua, the quiet, reliable mid-level executive who stayed late on Fridays and secured the tough, boring contracts. I was the man who had secretly orchestrated a $2 million philanthropic empire overnight, rubbing shoulders with the elite. As I stepped into the glass elevator, colleagues who usually offered a brief, dismissive nod were stopping in their tracks to shake my hand. When I reached the executive floor, Mr. Carter, the billionaire CEO who had attended my wedding in his pristine Rolls-Royce, walked entirely out of his way, bypassing his own assistants, just to greet me at my desk. He didn't ask about the quarterly financial projections. He asked about the charity fund. He asked how Chloe was recovering from the weekend. He invited me into his office, poured 2 cups of black coffee, and offered me a massive executive promotion on the spot, complete with a salary increase that would secure my future for the next 3 decades. For the first time in my entire professional life, I wasn't just being respected for my output or my corporate utility. I was being deeply respected for my character and my quiet power. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the private landline sitting on my sleek glass desk rang. Only high-level clients had that specific number. I picked up the receiver and pressed it to my ear. Joshua. The voice on the other end hit my chest like a cold stone. It was my mother. But her voice was not smooth, polished, or dripping with that fake, practiced suburban elegance anymore. It was incredibly shaky. It was raw, trembling violently with a toxic cocktail of sheer panic, embarrassment, and boiling rage. She had discovered I blocked her cell phone number, so she actually went through the humiliating process of calling the corporate front desk, pretending to be a major client, just to be patched through directly to my private office. "Mom," I answered. My voice was dangerously steady. I leaned back in my heavy leather chair, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city skyline below. I felt no fear. I felt absolutely nothing. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded, her voice cracking loudly enough that I had to pull the receiver an inch away from my ear. "How could you humiliate your own flesh and blood on a global stage? Do you have any earthly idea what you have done to this family?" My phone has not stopped ringing for 48 consecutive hours. The neighbors are whispering at the grocery store. My friends from the country club are aggressively sending me links to news articles, demanding to know why I wasn't at my own son's luxurious wedding. "You made us look like absolute monsters, Joshua. You humiliated us in front of the entire world." I listened to her rapid, shallow breathing over the phone line. In the past, this exact tone of voice would have sent me into a blind, desperate panic. I would have tripped over my own words, apologizing profusely for taking up space, begging for her forgiveness, and offering to issue a public statement to clear her pristine name. But the man sitting in that executive office had changed at a fundamental molecular level. "I didn't humiliate you, Mom," I said calmly, letting the silence stretch before delivering the truth. "I simply lived my life. You made a conscious choice. You looked me dead in the eye in your living room and chose to completely erase me from the family narrative because you thought my presence would ruin your perfect Italian aesthetic. I accepted your brutal terms. I walked away without a fight. The world just happened to remind you that I still exist. You did this for revenge," she screamed, dropping the wounded victim act completely. "You couldn't stand the fact that Julian was getting the spotlight in Venice. You have always been deeply, bitterly jealous of him. You planned this massive, expensive circus just to spite your older brother. You wanted to ruin his week." "I didn't do it for revenge," I replied, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the heavy weight of absolute finality. "I did it because I finally woke up and realized I deserve to be seen. I did it because genuine kindness and purpose deserve a spotlight far more than your cruelty and shallow appearances. You could have invited me. You could have treated me like a son. But you didn't. You made your bed. And now you are absolutely horrified that everyone on the internet is looking at it." The line went completely dead silent for a long, agonizing minute. She had no script for this reality. She was waiting for me to back down, to fold like I always did. "Joshua," she finally whispered, trying an entirely new manipulative tactic. The angry, screaming mother vanished, instantly replaced by the frail, weeping woman. "Please, we are family. Blood is thicker than water. Your father is beside himself with grief. We haven't slept. You need to come over for dinner tonight so we can sit down as a family and fix this PR nightmare together." "I am not a PR crisis for you to manage," I said firmly, my jaw setting hard. "I am a grown man who built his own family. Do not ever call this office again." I placed the receiver down, cutting the connection. I didn't feel a massive rush of adrenaline. I didn't feel the petty thrill of victory. I just felt incredibly clean. The deep infection was finally gone. But people who thrive on control are never the type to accept a boundary without a massive fight. 3 days later, on a busy Thursday afternoon, the receptionist buzzed my desk. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry to interrupt your workflow, but your parents are standing in the main lobby. They are refusing to leave and say it is a family emergency." I closed my laptop, let out a slow breath, and took the elevator down to the ground floor. The corporate lobby of our headquarters is a massive, intimidating space filled with armed security guards, towering marble pillars, and high-end modern art. Standing awkwardly near the stainless steel security turnstiles were my mother and father. My mother was holding a massive, ostentatious bouquet of expensive white lilies. Her hands were shaking so hard the cellophane wrapping was audibly rattling. My dad was standing slightly behind her, holding a pink cardboard bakery box from the local pastry shop we used to go to when I was 10 years old. It was a pathetic, desperate picture. Stripped of their comfortable suburban kingdom, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of a ruthless corporate environment, they finally looked exactly like what they were. Two deeply insecure, aging people terrified of losing their social standing. I walked up to the security desk, keeping a safe distance. My mother stepped forward, forcing a wide, trembling, overly enthusiastic smile that looked more like a grimace. "Joshua, sweetheart, we thought we would surprise you for a quick lunch. We brought your favorite cherry pastries." I looked at the expensive flowers. I looked at the pink pastry box. Then, I looked directly into my father's eyes. The man who had sat silently in his recliner, drinking a beer, while my mother systematically ripped me out of their lives for 32 years. "You didn't come all the way down here to see me," I said quietly, ensuring the security guards didn't hear our private business, though my voice carried a heavy authority. "You came here because someone at your country club asked you an incredibly uncomfortable question about my wedding, and you desperately need to be seen in public handing me flowers to make yourselves feel like good parents. You are doing damage control in my lobby." "Joshua, please." My dad finally spoke, his voice weak and raspy. He looked 10 years older than he had at Julian's engagement dinner. "Don't do this to your mother. We're your parents. We made a terrible mistake." "You didn't make a mistake, Dad," I replied softly, shaking my head. "A mistake is forgetting to send a birthday card. A mistake is picking up the wrong dry cleaning. You consciously planned an international destination wedding, actively hid it from me for months, viciously mocked me in a group chat behind my back, and then looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough to attend. That is not a mistake. That is a series of very deliberate choices." I reached out and gently took the pink box of pastries from my father's trembling hands. I looked at my mother, who was now visibly crying, heavy tears ruining her perfect makeup. I couldn't tell if the tears were from genuine guilt or the sheer, crushing embarrassment of being rejected in a corporate lobby. "Thank you for the pastries," I said, my voice completely void of malice, but equally void of love. "But you need to leave right now. I don't want you ever showing up at my workplace again. If you do, I will have security escort you out." I turned my back on them and walked purposefully through the security turnstiles. I didn't look back once. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was standing behind me, and I was entirely focused on the brilliant, peaceful life waiting ahead of me. I chose my peace over their toxic approval, and the power in that choice was absolute and unbreakable. The real world doesn't wrap complex emotional trauma up in a neat little bow. Toxic people rarely look in the mirror, acknowledge the immense pain they have caused, and experience sudden, miraculous personal growth. Instead, they adapt. They pivot. They find new, insidious ways to spin the narrative so they can remain the noble heroes, or at the very least, the tragically misunderstood victims of their own story. A week after the tense incident in the corporate lobby, my phone vibrated loudly on my kitchen counter. It was an incoming call from Cameron, my brilliant PR strategist and now close friend. "Josh, man, you need to open Facebook right this second," Cameron said. His voice was laced with a strange mix of professional amusement and deep personal disgust. Your mother just went completely nuclear on the timeline. I grabbed my laptop, sat down at the kitchen island, and opened the app. Right at the very top of my feed, heavily boosted by the algorithm because of the massive engagement it was receiving, was a sprawling, multi-paragraph post from my mother. She had aggressively tagged me, Julian, my dad, Chloe, and about 50 other extended family members. The long wall of text was accompanied by an old, grainy, heavily filtered photograph of me and Julian playing in the backyard sprinklers when we were 5 and 6 years old. The post was an absolute masterpiece of emotional manipulation and gaslighting. My heart is so incredibly heavy today, and it is bleeding in ways I never thought possible. The post began, dripping with melodrama. As a dedicated mother, you only ever want the absolute best for your precious boys. You try your hardest to juggle everyone's fragile emotions, everyone's demanding needs, and sometimes, despite your absolute best intentions and endless sacrifices, tragic miscommunications happen. My beautiful, brilliant son Joshua recently got married, and due to a heartbreaking series of logistical errors and painful family misunderstandings regarding our intense travel schedules, we were incredibly devastated to not be there to hold his hand. Seeing the entire world celebrate my boy from afar has been both a profound joy and an agonizing, tearing pain in my chest. We should have celebrated him all along. We are publicly begging for his forgiveness and praying on our hands and knees for our beautiful family to heal from this tragic misstep. Please, I ask all of our friends to respect our privacy during this incredibly painful time of spiritual growth. I read the dizzying words twice, my jaw tightening. Logistical errors. Family misunderstandings. She completely, masterfully erased the part where she looked me directly in the eye and told me I would ruin her precious atmosphere. She painted herself as a tragic, deeply loving, misunderstood matriarch who was simply a victim of bad timing and cruel circumstances. This wasn't the first time she had done this. Years ago, during a massive, bitter inheritance dispute regarding my late grandfather's estate, she used the exact same tactic against her own sister, playing the weeping victim publicly while acting ruthlessly in private. It's a textbook PR stunt, Cameron said through the phone speaker, hearing my heavy silence. She is getting absolutely annihilated in her local social circles. People watched that high-quality live stream, Josh. They saw the Rolls-Royces. They saw the CEO of your company. They know you didn't just casually elope on a whim. They know it was a massive, meticulously planned global event. She is doing this because her local reputation is bleeding out fast, and she desperately needs the public to think you are the cruel, unforgiving, wealthy son withholding grace from a weeping, loving mother. I know, I said, aggressively rubbing the bridge of my nose, feeling a massive headache coming on. My Aunt Beatrice probably helped her draft it. Beatrice loves a public spectacle more than she loves breathing. Should I respond? Should I post the screenshot of the group chat? Absolutely not, Cameron replied firmly, his professional tone cutting through my frustration. Silence is your greatest, most devastating weapon right now. If you respond, you give her the oxygen she is desperately craving. You validate the ridiculous drama. Let her scream into the endless void. The internet is incredibly smart, Josh. They can see straight through a fake, heavily orchestrated apology. Cameron was right. I scrolled down. The comments under her sweeping post were absolutely brutal. People from my hometown, extended cousins who knew the real, toxic dynamics of our family, were not buying the logistical error excuse for a single second. For 32 years, I had begged and scraped for their public approval. Now, my mother was publicly begging for mine, not out of genuine love, but out of sheer, blinding desperation to save her own face. It wasn't the fiery, explosive revenge I had angrily fantasized about when I was a hurt 20-something. It was pure closure. Seeing her empty, pathetic words beneath my trending video, I realized I finally had everything I ever wanted. I was completely free of their grand illusion. But the final, most unexpected twist of the knife didn't come from my mother's public meltdown. It came late that night, around 1 a.m. I was sitting in the dark living room, reading a complex legal brief for work, when my phone vibrated sharply on the glass coffee table. It was Julian. I stared at his name glowing brightly in the dark room. We hadn't spoken a single word since his bitter, accusatory text message on the night of my wedding. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the red decline button, but eventually, I swiped right and answered the call. "Hello," I said softly, not wanting to wake Chloe. There was heavy, ragged breathing on the other end, accompanied by the distinct clinking of ice in a glass. Julian was drinking heavily. "Everyone's talking about your wedding, Josh," Julian slurred slightly, his voice thick with a strange, dark, heavy emotion I had never heard from him before. "Literally everyone. Even the guys from my college fraternity who I haven't seen in 10 years are messaging me on Instagram, asking how I didn't know my own little brother was casually friends with tech billionaires." "Julian, it's late," I said gently, feeling a sudden wave of exhaustion. "You're drunk. Go to sleep." "No. Shut up and listen to me," he snapped, though the sudden flash of anger quickly faded into something that sounded remarkably like total defeat. "My wedding in Venice. It was supposed to be the event of the entire decade. It was supposed to be perfect. Mom planned every single second of it to look like a movie. But we went into a massive amount of debt for that 1 week. Crippling debt. Claire is already screaming at me every day because the credit card bills are rolling in, and we can't afford the luxury lifestyle she thought we were going to have." He took a shaky, deep breath, the ice clinking loudly again. "She's practically throwing around the word divorce, Josh. We've barely been married 2 months, and she's already talking about calling a lawyer to protect her assets because my credit is completely destroyed. And while I'm drowning in debt for some stupid, fake aesthetic photos that nobody on the internet even cares about anymore, you raised $2 million for underprivileged kids. You broke the internet. You won." "It wasn't a competition, Julian," I said softly, the tragic, hollow reality of his life suddenly coming into sharp, painful focus. He was trapped in the exact same superficial, suffocating prison our parents had built. He was just the favored inmate. He traded his financial freedom and his peace of mind for their temporary applause. "Yes, it was," Julian whispered fiercely, his voice breaking. "It always was a competition. Mom and Dad made it a competition from the day we were born. And I was supposed to win. I was always supposed to win. You were the boring one. You were the guy who worked too hard for his corporate salary and didn't know how to have fun or be charming." He paused, his voice trembling violently between raw, crushing guilt and deep, agonizing envy. "Mom is embarrassed to show her face at the club. Dad is furious and drinking too much. But me, I'm just sitting here in the dark, looking at my bank statements, realizing that my entire life is a fake, carefully directed show, and yours is real." I sat in the quiet living room, absorbing the absolute devastation in my older brother's voice. The golden child was finally looking closely at his crown and realizing it was made of cheap plastic. "They'll survive, Julian," I told him gently. "I did." "You really changed the story, Josh," he whispered, a wet, tearful edge to his words. "You changed the whole damn story." For the very first time in my entire life, my brother didn't sound condescending. He didn't sound arrogant. He didn't sound like the golden boy. He sounded profoundly honest. And he sounded incredibly, desperately lost. "Take care of yourself, Julian," I said, and I gently ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the table. The war was officially over. I had reclaimed the space they repeatedly told me I didn't deserve. I didn't destroy my family. I simply built a mirror so massive, so bright, and so incredibly clear that they were finally forced to look at their own reflections. And they couldn't handle the ugly truth of what they saw. Exactly 1 year later, the world had moved on, as it always inevitably does. The viral news articles and trending hashtags about the coastal groom faded into the vast, endless archives of the internet. But the profound impact of that day remained incredibly permanent in my life. The charity fund Chloe and I established successfully built 3 new, fully staffed educational centers for underprivileged children. My corporate career flourished, completely unburdened by the heavy, exhausting anchor of family drama constantly dragging my energy down. And my marriage to Chloe became an impenetrable fortress of peace, built on a solid foundation of absolute truth, unwavering support, and mutual respect. To mark our one-year anniversary, Chloe and I decided to leave the noise of the city behind. We rented a quiet, beautifully secluded beach house miles away from everything. No cameras, no grand, orchestrated events, no high society guest lists, just the two of us, a good bottle of wine, and the rhythmic, soothing sound of the ocean crashing against the shoreline. On the crisp morning of our anniversary, I woke up early, before the sun had fully risen. I quietly walked out to the front porch to breathe in the salty air, and I immediately noticed a thick, cream-colored envelope slipped halfway under the woven doormat. My heart did a brief, familiar stutter in my chest. Even after a year of total silence, my body still remembered the trauma. I recognized the elegant, sweeping cursive handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. She must have hired an expensive private investigator to find out exactly where we were staying, or perhaps Aunt Beatrice had relentlessly tracked down the private rental information through her endless network of gossiping friends. I stood on the wooden porch, the cold sea breeze pulling aggressively at my shirt, and carefully tore open the heavy envelope. Inside was a single, neatly folded piece of expensive stationery. There was no grand, sprawling apology this time. No pathetic excuses about logistical errors. No desperate PR spin meant for a public audience. Just 3 simple sentences written in a slightly shaky, aging hand. I watched the wedding video again last night. You looked so genuinely happy, Joshua. More happy than I ever made you. I hope someday, if heaven allows it, we will get to see you smile exactly like that in person. I stood leaning against the wooden railing and read the words over and over until they blurred. I could feel the sharp, hot sting of tears gathering at the corners of my eyes, but they didn't fall. It wasn't the perfect, cinematic closure we all dream of when we are deeply hurt. It wasn't a tearful reconciliation where we fall into each other's arms, forgive decades of emotional abuse, and forget the painful past. But it was a quiet acknowledgement. It was a tiny hairline crack in her previously impenetrable armor of pride. Standing there watching the sun crest over the water, I realized something profound about healing. Maybe forgiveness isn't always about forgetting the deep cuts. Maybe forgiveness isn't about recklessly inviting highly toxic people back to your dinner table just so they have the opportunity to hurt you again. Maybe true, mature forgiveness is simply letting go of the burning anger that is destroying your own heart. It is letting your success and your absolute silence speak for you. It is wishing them well, hoping they find peace, but doing so from a very safe, heavily guarded, and permanent distance. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it deep into the pocket of my jacket, and walked down the wooden steps onto the damp beach. Chloe was already awake, walking far ahead of me, her bare feet sinking softly into the wet, cold sand. Her laughter carried over the sound of the wind. I jogged to catch up with her, firmly taking her warm hand in mine. We walked along the endless shoreline for miles, completely barefoot, entirely unburdened, and absolutely free. I paused for a moment and looked back over my shoulder at the long, deep trail of footprints we were leaving behind us in the sand. As I watched, a large sweeping wave rushed aggressively up the beach, washing cleanly over our tracks. When the frothy water pulled back into the deep ocean, the sand was perfectly, flawlessly smooth again. The tide erased every single footprint, just like the past finally letting go of its grip on my soul. You thought I would walk away broken? I whispered quietly to the wind, thinking of that cold Tuesday evening in my mother's pristine living room when she told me I wasn't good enough. A gentle wave brushed against my ankles, soft and cold, grounding me in the beautiful present moment. But I walked away free. If there is one crucial thing I want you to take away from my story today, it is this absolute truth. Your inherent value is never determined by the blind people who stubbornly refuse to see it. We are conditioned by society, by movies, and by tradition to believe that family is an unbreakable, sacred bond. We are taught that blood requires absolute, unquestioning loyalty, even when that exact loyalty is actively destroying your mental health and self-worth. But holding on to a highly toxic family dynamic just because you happen to share a last name or a bloodline is like willingly drinking poison every single day and expecting the other person to get sick. You have the absolute, undeniable right to set firm boundaries. You have the right to aggressively protect your peace. When people show you exactly who they are, when they exclude you, when they mock you behind your back, or when they treat you as a disposable, inconvenient background character in their grand lives, believe them the very first time. You do not have to scream. You do not have to seek petty, destructive revenge. The most devastating, powerful response to blatant disrespect is massive, undeniable success and total, unwavering indifference. Reinvent yourself. Build your own table from scratch. Invite the people who actually celebrate you and love you for who you are, and let the rest of them watch you feast from outside the glass. I would deeply love to know what part of this journey resonated with you the most. Have you ever had to gather your courage and walk away from someone you truly loved just to protect your own peace and sanity? What was your biggest takeaway or the most valuable lesson you found in my story? Please leave your thoughts and your stories in the comments below, or simply drop the word good, so I know that these lessons brought some genuine value and comfort to your day. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your incredible, ongoing support, and please always remember, you are the sole author of your own story. Do not ever let anyone else hold the pen.